Mr. Kip Sorensen, what's up, brother? Good to see you, man.
Good to see you.
Everything going good on the home front for you?
Yeah, it's I love the holidays. I love this time of season. It's I don't know. I just enjoy it. So, and there's
It's a
lots of
good time
work
of
like
year.
yeah, and it's busy for us. A lot of companies will, if they have outstanding budgets and stuff, they want to burn, you know what I mean? So there's kind of a spike in work and a little bit of chaos, but balance it out. It all works.
It's slower for me, which I kind of like. It's like nobody wants to interview, nobody's really doing anything, and so they kind of shut down for the last month of the year. And I'm like, that's. I used to be all stressed out about it. Now I'm like, that's awesome. I love that. So we got
Yeah.
some little things coming up. Like obviously we've got our trip that you and I will be on next week, and then we're doing we're doing the football banquets here at our place, and we were supposed to do one tonight and then one another night, but I think Trish got mixed up a little bit and she put them on the same day, and so we're
At
like,
different
oh crap,
times.
no, the same time, the same day,
Oh,
the
so you
same
need to
time.
confirm if something's
So that's supposed to be this afternoon, but I think our oldest son is doing it somewhere else, and our youngest son, and I told them they were going to do it like a month ago, but I told them, I said, you can do it in on December 2nd, but it's going to be cold. Like our barn isn't heated. And so I
Yeah.
turned the water back on to the bathrooms in the barn, and everything's frozen. And I put heaters in there trying to warm it up. And we have space heaters in the barn trying to warm it up. So hopefully it'll be warm enough. But I'm going to my oldest son's, which is indoors, and Trish is staying here with my second son. So they'll be cold.
Freezing.
I'll be warm. We're good to go.
Yeah. Way to look out for the family.
I told her I'd stay here, but she's like, no, I'll stay here because she's cooking like 6 roasts, like these huge, big roasts, and they look amazing. So it's a trade
Yeah.
off. I'm going to be warm, but I'm probably not going to have as good a food. She's going to have great food. It's just going to be a little colder. So it's like, which one do you go with?
Yeah, that's funny. That's
Well, cool,
funny.
man. Well, let's get into some questions. These are questions I think from, I believe they're leftover questions from from Facebook from last week,
Yes.
correct?
Yes,
All
sir.
right. Let's get
Yes,
into them,
sir.
man. Let's crank them out.
Yeah. And to join us there on Facebook, that's facebook.com/group/order of man. All right. Eric. Actually, no, not Eric. Wrong guy. Tim Fredsma. I've identified a group of people that I want to be around on both personal and professional levels, but I've only had tangible contact with them. Actually, integration would require location and professional changes in order to join. What are your suggestions for first steps to initiate and continue building relationships in order to move forward with that group while supporting my family?
There's a lot of big words in there.
Yeah.
What was he saying about initiate and like integrate?
Well,
And I think
I mean,
let me just say it this way. I think you're being too robotic about it.
yeah. Well, he's
That's
almost
the
even
first
saying
thing
like, I'm not even in a professional space to connect with these guys. And I'm like, well, I don't know if that's required per se. Right. But
why I don't see, it's just like, this is a classic case of just overthinking it.
yeah.
You're using these big words, and not that I'm opposed to using a big word here and there, but you're like so robotic about it that it just really sounds disingenuous to me, actually.
Mm,
And I think the first step would be to just let that go and consider that maybe this can happen a little bit more organically. And I'm not saying to play passive at all,
yeah.
but without knowing the context of the guys that you want to connect with, just either go where they are. So if they're at professional meetings, if they're at certain events, then go to those events and connect with those people in an approachable, humanistic way. And if they're not, then either create your own event or potentially invite these guys to your event or to your environment. And I've done this in a lot of different ways. If I've identified somebody who I like or I get along with or I'd like to know more, it sounds weird because we only tend to look at it in the context of romantic interests. And so, you'll hear guys say, hey,
Like
you want to come
you
hang out?
pursue a
No
woman, but you
homo.
want to, yeah.
Right. And it's like, you don't need to say that. I get why you think you need to say that, but we've sexualized every aspect of life that you can't just say, hey, man, like I'm going to have some guys over for fight night next week. You want to come? without you having to say no homo or put in your qualifier of choice. You don't need to say that. Just or go golfing. You know, hey, I'm going golfing. I got 3 guys. I got room for one other person. You want to come? Like that. We tend to just overthink it, overcomplicate it. Or another good way is, Kip, if I knew you in either a professional or personal, semi-personal setting, I mean, I would know that you're married. I'd know you'd have kids. I'm interested in getting to know who you are, maybe a little bit more. And I would just create a date. I'd say, hey, Friday night, Kip, my wife and I are thinking about going out. Would you and your wife be interested in joining us? Like, we're going to meet it, for dinner at Chili's at 7, like, and we'll, get a table for 4. I don't think that's that hard. I just think you're overthinking it. And there's just more organic, natural ways to approach it that I think will lead to more success.
How would you address that differently if it's more of a professional relationship you're wanting to form?
I would actually do the same thing, but what I would say is, so if you and I, Kip, run more of a professional as opposed to a personal setting, I would say to you, hey, Kip, every week I go meet on Wednesday with 20 other business professionals. And I know you're an entrepreneur, and I'm sure you have some great insight to share, and people would be interested in hearing what it is you do. And I know you'd be interested in hearing what they do. I've got an extra ticket. You want to come to this conference? Would you be interested in attending this thing?
Yeah.
I would say the same thing, but I would just cater what event I was going to based on the interest or based on the angle that I wanted to take with who I'm trying to connect with.
Want to talk shop, run some ideas by you, value your opinion, if you wouldn't mind. Yeah.
Or another way is to identify something that you would need, a problem that you have that you would need solving, and then find another person in your circle who could potentially solve that problem for you. And then just invite you 3 to go to lunch, not with the anticipation of, hey, I'm going to solve all your problems, or I'm going to get this guy to sell or whatever, but just, hey, look, Kip, I know you got this X, Y, and Z problem. I'm not going to blindside you. That's a no-no. Yeah. But, hey, Kip, I've got this X, Y, and Z problem that I know you're aware of and that you're concerned with. Well, I've got this guy over here, and he actually has gone through that. He went through that last year, and he's got some really good solutions that he went through.
Yeah.
I mean, I almost think it makes sense to just go grab some lunch together and just hash some of these things out. Would you be interested?
Totally.
Man, what an easy way to do that. And then to create a win-win environment for you in this case, and the guy I'm going to introduce you to.
Yeah. Tim, part of his question was, a feeling of having to relocate geographically into the mix. Does that change things up for you from that perspective? Any advice around that?
I'm not going to,
obviously you're not going to grab lunch, but I mean, you wouldn't go, well, it's just not, I can't form a relationship with Pete because he's in Maine. So,
that one's actually a little different because I was really, really drawn to what Pete was doing himself and what he was doing with Origin. And I'm not going to lie and deny that what he was doing wasn't a factor of why we considered moving here.
But you were establishing a relationship with Pete before you moved. It's not like you moved here and then went knocking on his door and said, hey, let's go to lunch,
Right. And we built that relationship on a more formal business type setting.
Yeah.
Because they were sponsoring the podcast. And then he had said, hey man, like, we sponsor the podcast. I know you were training a couple of times. You ought to come out here to Maine and do this immersion camp. And I said, cool. Yeah. Sounds good. That's another lesson actually, is that when people invite you, you should probably say yes. It's very easy to say no because we're busy and we're consumed and we have all sorts of things. And you should exercise some discernment regarding what you say yes and no to. But if there's opportunities, then you better jump at that. And you would actually be maybe you wouldn't be surprised, but there are a lot of men out there who don't say yes to opportunities. And then they have the audacity to complain about why other guys have all the luck. Well, you got to put yourself in those situations, and then you got to say yes when those opportunities present themselves. So
totally.
Yeah. And also if you don't need to form a face-to-face connection with. I mean, how many guys have I talked with that are friends of mine? In fact, I just had a good conversation with Granger Smith. He was on a podcast several months ago. He's a country music artist. He's very, very successful. And I just sent him a text and I said, hey man, I've been thinking about you. How's this one particular thing going. I can't disclose what it is, but this one particular thing going. And he said, "Oh yeah, it's going really good. Thanks for reaching out. Here's what I'm dealing with. And how are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm doing good here, but I'm struggling here." He's like, "Oh yeah, I've struggled with that. And here's 3 things I remembered that helped me." And like it took us a 10-minute text conversation. Cool. I'm more connected to him. He's more connected to me. We didn't have to be face to face. And then when we get together face to face, it's going to be that much better. So there isn't really a need, especially with the technology and digital era that we live, where you have to absolutely be face to face with somebody in order to formulate a connection. You and I do it every single week, and we're literally across the country from each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And in fact, if I just went to California, that's the only way I'd get any further. And of course, we know that's never going to happen. So this is the furthest one could be.
They need you, kid. They need you.
Yeah. All right. Next question. Lucas Johnson. How do you deal with social media fame that you've acquired, Mr. Mickler? Do you think
I'm famous? I'm famous.
Do you think that it's
Kip, I'm famous.
bad? Do you think it's bad? And how do you unplug?
Hell no, it's not bad. It's awesome. It's great because it advances the mission.
Yeah.
Social media gets shit on a lot. And I actually am the one doing it quite often. There's a lot to be critical of when it comes to social media and our tech overlords, but also it's a tool like any other tool. A carpenter who just slammed the shit out of his thumb wouldn't say hammers are stupid.
Yeah.
He would say, "Oh, I use that." He'd be mad at himself for using it incorrectly. And that is the same with social media. If you're not experiencing the results that you want, or you look at it as a negative thing, or you hate it or despise it, then maybe you're just using the tool incorrectly. So I don't think I'm social media famous by any means, but maybe I might get recognized if I'm in the airport or something like that. That's awesome. I love it. I mean, from the sake of my own narcissism, it's pretty nice. I'm like, yeah, that's right. People recognize me. And my wife's like, "What were you doing?" I'm like, "Talking to my fans." What do you think I was doing? So there's that side of it. But then the other side of it is like, why wouldn't I want to be recognized? Why wouldn't I want to be acknowledged? The fact that I can use social media and reach millions and millions of people, literally millions of people, to spread a mission that I think is important is awesome. There's no other time in human history that any one person has been able to reach so many others. I love it. I'm so grateful for it. And I'm going to use it to the best of its ability.
Yeah. And as long as you maintain focus of vision, purpose, of why you're doing it, and don't get into the comparison trap. And, like there's obviously
which I do
areas where
from time to time.
Yeah. But there's areas that we could easily fall into, but I think those same things you could replace the word social media and replace it with something else, right? It's like jiu-jitsu is great as long as you don't use it as a crutch to avoid your family and your responsibilities, or reading a book could even be negative if you're not taking action and executing on being with your family of higher priority items, and social media is probably no different.
Or if you take jiu-jitsu and you just beat the shit out of every person you walk by on the street, then I would say probably not the best use of jiu-jitsu.
I thought that was okay. What? Hold on.
That's acceptable for you,
okay.
but not for me. So, I mean, it's really how you use it. Look, and I'll also say this though, because I'm not what you said, social media famous, I think is the word you used. I don't really experience any negative. I've never had any negative encounter offline that started online. So I'll have a lot of people, for example, who, maybe somebody recognizes me in the airport or at a restaurant, and they might approach me. Not a whole lot of people approach me relative to how many people I think recognize me, because you can always see when somebody recognizes you, but they won't approach you. It's really awkward.
Yeah.
I usually just give them a nod, like, "Hey, how you doing?" And that might open it up. So by the way, if you see me somewhere, come say hello. I want you to say hello.
He needs his ego.
I want you to and do it in front of my wife. And if you could, while you're at it, talk to me about how good I am. Talk to me about all the things that I've done to improve your life, and how you idol and worship the ground I walk on. That would be much appreciated. Especially if it's in front of my wife, or business partners, my kids. Completely acceptable.
So hold on. So you're like, I just have to pull this out right here. So is this going to be backwards? Probably, huh?
It looks right here, the way I'm looking at it.
Okay. We'll see if that shows up on YouTube. 100K.
It's 100,000, baby.
Yeah.
It's
When was
100,000
that?
people.
When was that reached? Just recently.
Yeah, it's a couple, two or 3 days ago, I think, maybe last week,
I don't know.
sometime in there.
That's pretty famous. Where I feel good about myself is I come over here to the following area, and I'm number one person that Ryan follows.
You're my number one fan, Kip. Now, they only show that they're at number one because that's you, right?
Oh, what? Shit.
No. You're my number one fan.
Yeah.
I'm your number one fan. What I was gonna say a minute ago is I've never had any negative interaction offline that derived from online. Like anybody who's followed me and has come said hello, it's all positive. But there'll probably come a point in time if I continue to do what I'm doing where somebody might make a comment or make a scene, attempt to make a scene or whatever. And so I might change my tune at that time. But as of right now, I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. Copy. Kyle Shields. Ryan, how did you lead your family through the loss of Sarge? Might only be a pet, but I suppose this is greater question about leading through grief.
Yeah, I mean, let me say it this way. Sarge was our dog. I don't think dogs are humans. I don't treat them like humans. Sarge was a member of our family, but he wasn't my child. Yeah. I wasn't his father. And I think there's a lot of people who think that. So,
well, only people that don't have kids. Yeah.
Yeah. And so for anybody, and they say, they're like, well, you don't know. Yeah, you're right. I don't know, except for I have a dog and you don't have a child. So there is that.
Yeah.
So I kind of do know. And I'm not going to say what people grieve and what they should and shouldn't. We all do it different ways. But what I'm trying to say is that if there's a man listening who's lost a child, not a dog, but a child or a parent, and I have lost a parent, my father, or a loved one of whoever that may be, that it's different than losing a dog. I just want to throw that out there because I don't want to do anybody a disservice or put down or dismiss what anybody who's actually experiencing a significantly greater loss than losing the family dog. Now, that said, it was hard, man. It sucked. Like 3 days before he died, the dog and I were out playing in the field and we were wrestling. And one night he was walking around almost as if he was drunk and he was banging into things.
Almost had a seizure almost, or
no seizure. He was just literally just walking around drunk. Like he was just running into the wall with his hips. I'm like, what in the world's going on? So we put him to bed. I woke up it was probably around midnight, 1 o'clock, somewhere in there. And I heard this noise in my oldest son's room. And so I went in there and our dog was kind of hunkered in between the bed and the wall. And there was probably like a foot of space in that little gap there. And so I'm like trying to grab Sarge and pull him. And it was evident that his back legs weren't working. So that's weird. What's going on? So eventually I pulled him out of there and I put him on the bed and just laid him there. Well, the next morning, not only were his back legs not working, his front legs weren't working. And I just thought, I don't know. I knew it was something with like neurological. And so I thought, well, maybe it's a tick and he got a disease from a tick. Maybe it's like, I didn't really know, but it was something affecting his brain and his motor skills. So we waited for about a day or two and it only got worse. And so we loaded him up in the Suburban and took him to the vet. And I actually said goodbye. I'm like, they're going to put the dog down. Like, I'm just going to say bye right now because they're going to put the dog down. Well, my wife calls me and she's like, hey, I talked to the vet. They did blood work. It's nothing. It's not a tick. It's not a disease. It's nothing like that. She thinks it's neurological. And I had to have a real conversation with her. And I said, look, hon, I mean, we can take him to the hospital, but if they're going to come back and they're going to say, you're going to need to spend 10, 20, whatever, $1,000 on surgery, I think we need to come to the conclusion right now that we're not doing that.
Yeah. And
she said, no, I know that's hard, but I agree with you. And so they did the scans and whatnot, and it ended up being an inoperable brain tumor is what it was. That was putting pressure on the dog's brain, causing him to lose motor function. And it was inoperable. So fortunately, we didn't have to make the decision
Yeah.
to put him down, but unfortunate that we did. And we put him down. And here's where I can start telling you about the lessons of leading people through this. Like, we didn't hide it from our kids. We didn't hide it. We didn't sugarcoat it or like make it fairy tale or whatever. My wife actually said, do you think, she said this in front of the kids, and I was like, I don't know how to answer this. She says, do you think we'll see Sarge again? And I know what she was looking for. Like, she was looking for me to say, oh yeah, we'll see him in heaven. That's what she wanted me to say.
Yeah.
And I said, I thought about it. My kids were there. And I'm like, no, I don't think that.
Dick.
And she looked at me. So yeah, maybe, but I'm going to get to why I said that.
Yeah. I'm just teasing.
And so she's like, what? And I was like, I don't. I think we had our time with Sarge. I think we had a great time. I think we enjoyed each other's company, but no, I don't think we'll see him in heaven. She's like, well, how could you? And I said, well, dogs don't have souls, and kids, I think look, I'm not going to tell you what to believe, but this is what I believe. And here's why. And I didn't sugarcoat any of it, which would have been very easy for me to say, yeah, we'll see him and he'll be great and we'll see him in heaven. Like, why would I lie? Like, I don't believe that. Why would I lie about that? And so my oldest son, which is actually his dog, was in the room when we put the dog down. My oldest son and I dug the hole because we didn't have them cremate it. We said, no, we'll take the body. We took the body from the hospital. All of us were there. We put the dog's body in the bed in the back of the Suburban. We dug the hole. We put his body in there. We buried it. We sat around and we got chairs and we told stories about Sarge. And that's what we did. We fully embraced death.
Yeah.
Which sucks. And for like a week, and I'm still like, I don't like talking about it because I still miss Sarge, but we dealt with it realistically, like in reality.
Yeah.
And because of that, then we were able to have better conversations about death and how it's part of life and why we need to remember the good things. And I think the same holds true for another person, a loved one, although again, different scales. I'm not going to sugarcoat things because it would have been way easier for me to say, for them to say, yeah, cremate the body. We don't want to know anything about it. We don't want to hear about it. Yeah, we'll see the dog in heaven. Like, way easier to say all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But that isn't the right way to handle it, in my perspective. So that's how we did it. And I think that's generally a pretty good way to go about doing it because it brings closure and then you can all move on. And that's what you need. You need to close it. It's a chapter,
not avoid it.
And you can revisit the chapter, right? Like a book, you read one chapter, you read it, you turn the page, the chapter's over. But if you want to go back, you can go back and reread that chapter.
Yeah.
But the chapter's over, like it's done. And I think knowing that it's done is a very important part of grieving and moving on.
Stephen Maltez, I want the management position at my job. I can and do everything. I can do everything there is to be done. They tell me they want me to stay in the current position because I'm too valuable to replace. Our turnover is high when it comes to employees, but my question is, when should that answer they give me no longer be acceptable?
So there's one thing I would say right here. Have you hired your replacement, hired and trained your replacement? This is a very interesting thing about leadership. So a lot of guys don't like to lead other people to replace them because they consider it like a damage to their ego. It's a threat. So you're not going to hire a replacement. And this is why that's wrong. What you're running across right now is the exact reason why it's so destructive to let your ego get in the way. And I'm not saying this gentleman has it, by the way.
Yeah.
But to let an ego get in the way to the point of you not hiring a replacement, because I think they're probably telling the truth. Maybe not totally, but I think what they're actually saying is it's more comfortable and convenient right now for you to stay where you are because
Yeah.
if we promoted you, then we'd have to hire somebody else, and then there
They're
would be
going
the
to do a
cost
shit
of
job.
that.
Yeah, totally.
Yes. So it's definitely more convenient to keep you where you are. You need to make that just as convenient to promote. Hey,
Yeah.
guys, look, I know you said 6 months ago I was so important in this job, and what I've been doing is I've been training Bob and Joe and Jill and Steve, and now they actually know everything that I know. And so this can be a seamless process. Now, there's a risk. There's a risk because now the risk is, well, what do we need you for?
Yeah.
If Jill can do it, or Joe can do it, or Steve can do it, and they can do it for 20% less than we're paying you, why do we need you here? So there's another game. There's another part of the game. The other part of the game is you got to be building your network outside of your organization. So if at any point in time you became replaceable, whether by your own doing or somebody else's doing, it's like, cool, I'll just go over here. Now, I think that's probably going to be the exception rather than the rule. I think what a honorable, intelligent employer would do is say, wow, you're actually pretty valuable. You're a great trainer. You got these 4 people, and now they can do everything that you do. Can you go over to this department and train them? And so you begin to promote up because you prove that you're capable of doing so. But don't allow yourself, like, don't close off the other doors. Like, don't play yourself is what I would say.
Yeah.
Build a team, but worry about making sure to build your network. And this is the one thing that a lot of people overlook. Build your network outside, build connections, build relationships, develop your client advisor relationship, whatever that looks like. So that if at any time there was a threat to your job, you could just, like, for example, if Order of Man shut down for whatever reason, maybe there's new regulation or podcast went away or whatever, it just went away. I think I'd have a new gig, a pretty solid gig lined up within a day.
Yeah. Because
I have connections, I have relationships, I have valuable people that I've added value to in their own lives, and they see what I can do. And so I think I'd have a gig lined up pretty quick. I don't want that to happen, but you can bet that I've got my bases covered. That's for sure.
And I think, to your point, that reaching out could even be, depending on the size of the org, right, within the organization, right, that other teams see your value, what you bring to the table, and not just your immediate team. One thing I saw that Stephen wrote here, I think is, and it's hard to illustrate, Stephen, so I'm not even sure if this is like exactly applicable to the management position, but be careful not to think that, to get in that trap of like, well, for me to be influential, I need that position of authority first, and then I could level up. And for some orgs, that quote unquote management position, you could maybe, at least in some instances, you can maybe be acting in that position already without the title, which then you get to a point where it's like, hey, I want to apply for this position. And everyone's like, oh, that's a no-brainer, right? Because you've already stepped up. You're already showing up in a way that you've already proven yourself without even necessarily getting the title. Now, of course, there's some dynamics there where you don't want to step on toes per se, but I'll tell you right now, like I have guys on my team that are sometimes I've heard like, oh, well, if I had this position, I have this authority. You're like, you have that authority now. And not only that, you don't want to be a manager from the space of authority. Oh, well, I got this title, so now I can. No. You want to be influential in a way that I've had conversation. I can communicate the value of certain things, and people follow me because it makes sense, not because I have a title. And that's the tall tale sign whether someone's ready for management, in my opinion.
Yeah, those are all good points. And one other thing I would add here, Kip, is so if you really want to know if they're telling the truth, you got to probe a little bit more, and you got to take away the reason. So, for example, you and me, Kip, are having a conversation, and I come to you, which, by the way, I like your intention of like, hey, I want this management position. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So you're my manager or boss or employer, and I come to you and I say, hey, Kip, been with the organization for a couple of years. Here's what I've added, and I'm really interested in this management position that is opening up. Would you be willing to consider me for that position? And then you came back and you said, well, Ryan, yeah, we can consider you, but you're too valuable in your current position. You said the same thing.
Yeah.
Here's what I would say. Oh, well, thank you. And you have to genuinely mean it. Like, that's a compliment.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad that you recognize that I'm doing a good job here. Right. I really appreciate that. So, but here's the game. I need to paint you in a corner. But you're not doing this deceitfully. Like, you got to do it with the right way, with the right motive, which is to like really genuinely figure this out. So here's how you do it. Oh, well, thank you for letting me know. That actually means a lot to me. I wasn't aware that you felt that way about my performance. So I'm glad to know that. It sounds like, if I'm understanding you correctly, that the reason you wouldn't consider me now for the promotion is because there isn't somebody that would replace me and that would do as good a job as me. Is that right? And you would say yes, right?
Yep.
Here's the painting you into the corner thing. Okay. So then it's based on what I'm hearing you say, it would be safe to assume that at this point, maybe I should consider training some other people so that I can promote. So if I were to train somebody to do just as good a job or better than me, would there be any reason why I couldn't have the management position?
Yeah.
Like, I just painted you into telling the truth, or actually getting to the root of it too.
Yeah. And just a little tactic, right? When you said that, I immediately went with like, oh, I might have to criticize him. So if you're nervous, like this person's a little bit passive and they may not you don't have their type of relationship where they might give you critical feedback. Another way that you could say that same thing is, could I possibly train up someone to replace me? And what would you recommend that I focus and work on to better prepare myself for that management position? Oh, yes. Well, you know what? And then they'll give you it without it coming across as a negative against you, right? And it's now just something that you need to work on.
You're right. But I think you need to take that suggestion even further, because again, so if I came to you and I used what you just said, which I think is right.
Yeah.
Hey, so are there a few things I can be working on so you'd feel comfortable and be like, oh yeah, guess what I just gave you the opportunity to do? Kick the can down the road. That's what I'm trying to avoid. Yeah. I don't want you, I need you in the corner.
Yeah.
And so the way that you put them back in the corner is, okay, so are there some things that I can work on? And you say, oh, Ryan, really could work on your time management and your communication skills. Good. So if in the next 3 months, I improve my time management, and I'll track everything. Yeah. And I'll show you how valuable my time has been over the past 3 months. And then I have the ability to more effectively communicate with you and my team members. And you'll be able to know because I'm training these people. Yeah. Then I would like to apply in 3 months and talk with you about at that point. So if we got together in March, can we have a deeper conversation about this?
Yes.
I'm not letting you off the hook, bro.
Yeah.
I'm not but you got to do it respectfully, because you don't want to challenge authority. That's not what you're doing. You got to get them in the corner where they have no outs. Otherwise they'll take it and run.
And then after they commit to it, you set up that appointment, and then you send a follow-up email saying, all right, based upon our conversation, here's my focus for the next 3 months. I'm going to train up individuals to address and be, efficient in these key areas. My development plan for the next 3 months is going to work on this area. This is what I plan to do on a regular basis, report back to you progress and improving in these areas. Let me know if I missed anything.
Yep. And then what you do over the next 3 months is you do what you said you're going to do. So you train your replacement, you work on the improvements that they had suggested. There's two other things. You build your resume, and you bust your ass for the next 3 months, getting other opportunities lined up, because there is a likelihood that I go to you, Kip, in 3 months, and I say, Kip, it's March 1st. We talked about this. Remember? Okay. So here's what I've done. Bill and Sally and Jim, they're all trained up. And I would actually recommend Jim. I think Jim would do a great job, and here's why. And my communication skills, here's what I've done. As far as time management, I actually tracked my hours, and based on what I was developing before, I was worth $100 an hour. And now, based on time management, if you look at it, I'm worth $200 an hour now. And so can we talk about that management position? You might say no. And in that case, you might have a decision to make, which is it might be time to move on, but you can only do that. And the person who wins, this is a negotiation tactic. The person who wins the negotiation is the one who cares least. Let me say that again, because it's really important. The person who wins the negotiation is the one who cares least. So if you have to have the job, you care more than them because they can replace you, especially since you just developed and trained your replacement.
Yeah.
In order to care less than your employer, you need to have another job lined up.
Yeah.
And then you care less. And that you're not using it as a threat. It's not a threat. You're not saying, if you don't give me, I'm leaving. No, we're doing this respectfully. We're doing this. It's not a threat, but I can guarantee you that the way that you communicate and articulate yourself will change if you've got 10 other offers over here lined up that you could take on a moment's notice. And you want to give the person you respect you. I respect you, Kip, as my employer. I want to give you every opportunity for me to continue to work with you. But if you're not interested in that, it's okay. I got other opportunities over here.
It's just not a good fit. Yeah. And it doesn't make you as desperate, and have some confidence when you know you have other options, right?
And it's going to come across. It's going to come across.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Keenan Webb, kind of similar question. How did you know when to leave your jobs? Leave your job, singular.
So the job that I left was leaving from the financial planning practice. I mean, I've left other jobs, but this was the main one, is leaving from my financial planning practice to do order of man stuff. I didn't know. I really didn't. I had
a little bit of leap of faith
built up. Yeah, it was absolutely. Because there was a discrepancy between the income I needed and the income I had 100%. But I did a couple of things. I was able to sell my business. I was able to replace a portion of that income. I had some money in the bank that would hold me over until I was able to build enough additional revenue to replace what I was leaving. So for me, it came down to the finances of it. And then at that point, it was just, like you said, the rest of it was just a leap of faith, knowing that, hey, I've had success in other facets of life, so I can be successful in this, and I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
Is that different for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it was really interesting so I sold and joined with another company that was a competitor of mine. And we were kind of friends. We'd go snowboarding together every so often. He'd owe me lunch if I lost a contract to him, and vice versa. It was kind of like a banter thing. And I remember he texted me once and said, how much do I have to pay you to buy you out? Just out of nowhere. And I'm like, whatever. Right. Like, there's no way, because you could never, and I literally said this, there's no way you could compete with what I have. Flexibility of time. I make way more money than you realize, because you own your own business and tax write-offs and dividends and all those kind of things. And it's my baby, right? Like, I made up that logo. It has my name attached to it. Like, there's this identity that's attached to it. You can never compete with that. And he goes, I think I can. And I'm like, all right, let's have lunch. Right. And we literally talked about each of the things, like if I came on board, how could I possibly come on board and I feel like this was mine. Right. How do I come on board and still have the flexibility of time? And how are you going to pay me substantially enough that I can give up my own thing and join? Right. And so those were the key 3 criteria that I kind of focused on. But the main thing that made it interesting for me was I felt that I was so wrapped up in making it mine that it had to do a little bit more with ego than it was about like how far, or collaborating with others, and like how far could we go as a team. And I kind of missed that doing my own thing. Like for 15 years, it was kind of like me running a company, and I didn't have peers. I felt like I was running solo, and I don't know. And I didn't collaborate with a team as much, and that was one of the things that was really appealing by closing up shop and coming here, is I really felt like I had this invested buy-in into the company, and I had peers where we could collaborate and build something amazing together. And I love team oriented stuff, right? I don't want to run solo. Like, I can, but I don't know, like, it's so much more enjoyable to do it with a group. And those are the things that were kind of I don't know, on my radar to be determined. So
Yeah, I think those are good. Let's back up just a little bit here though, and just to answer the question as briefly as we can here. If you're asking questions about that, it's really probably time that you start, if you haven't already, looking for alternatives. And at this point, I would say it's really just a matter of strategy and execution.
yeah,
Because I don't want you to be reckless. That's the last thing I want. And I think some people are. I'm not happy here, so I'm leaving. Well, hold on. Is it that you're not happy, or that you just had a bad day? Is it that you're not fulfilled, or is it that you're not doing everything you could potentially be doing to be fulfilled? Like, hold up a second. Like, let's really think about this. So strategy comes into play. And then from there, it's execution. And what you're saying is the things that you were looking for, that's part of the strategy equation.
yeah,
Right? Here's what I would need. Here's how much money. Here's, I would need to be fulfilled. I would need to be able to work with a team. I'd need to have some autonomy over my schedule. Those are all factors that are a part of strategy. But the first thing is, yeah, if you're thinking about it, like you really at this point owe it to yourself to explore the possibility of leaving, what that would look like, what would need to happen, how it can happen, and then execute from there.
yeah. Knowing the default nature of most people, I would be careful that you're just not thinking that your problems today are a result of your current job, and that leaving and going somewhere else, they're going to get fixed without
Yeah, I agree.
without evaluating. Like you used the analogy already, like, are you just having a bad day? I know two people that have the same exact job. One of them thinks it's the best job on earth, and the other one hates it. What's the difference? Right? It's like, part of me feels like, are you killing it? Are you showing up in a powerful way? Because sometimes people have a tendency to go like, oh, this is crap. And they go get a new job and it's exciting for a little while. And then they bring the same problems that they brought into their last employment. And the problems sometimes are right, and how you're showing up in that org. So just be mindful of that, because we live in a world of like, oh, yeah, I don't like the car anymore, so I'm going to trade it in, or I don't like my spouse, it's too difficult, I'll just get a divorce and find a new wife. Like, just be mindful of that, because I think that's too much of a natural tendency, I think.
I think it can be, but I don't think that's exclusive either. So
Yeah, I agree.
And I'm not saying that you think it is either, but I do want to present the alternative. In my financial planning practice, I would have conversations with a good friend of mine, Greg Black. In fact, Greg is the one who bought my financial planning practice. We got into the business together. We worked with the same company. We worked with separate companies, and then we merged together and we worked together, and then we went our own way and built our own companies. But we always stayed in touch and we're friends. And I've very early into our financial planning practice, I would have conversations with Greg about, and I'm like, I'm not going to be doing this forever. I knew that.
Like this is a short game. Yeah.
Right. But in the meantime, I was fully committed. I was all in. I was building it, and I was doing things in a meaningful and significant way. And I was exploring veins and avenues that I really liked, like marketing and things like that. And then eventually, long story short, I went on to sell the practice to Greg. And I'm very happy and fulfilled with where I am now with Order of Man and what I'm doing. In fact, I feel called and compelled to do this work. And what's interesting is I've had conversations with Greg. He feels the exact same way about his line of work. And yet I was miserable.
Yeah.
Right at the end, I was miserable. And he's doing it now. And he's like, I love it. What are you talking about? So I don't think it's, and again, you're not saying this, but it is not exclusively, oh, just make the job what you can. I would say do that first. That's the low hanging.
Make sure to take advantage of what you have.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
And if that shores the problems up, awesome. Good. That's good. That's better. But if it doesn't, and it becomes chronic, your dissatisfaction becomes chronic in spite of you doing everything you can to maximize your work, it's time. It's time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good measurement. All right, Alan Hernandez, how do you find work-life balance when you're in the startup phase of a business?
There isn't. There isn't. If you want work, if you want what you're describing, what I can only assume you're describing by work-life balance, don't start a business.
Yeah.
Good hell. Like just go work somewhere. punch in at 8 o'clock, punch out at 5, don't work nights, don't work weekends. I'm not even dismissing that. I'm not even bagging on that, right? Like, do that. If you want work-life balance, do that. It's a trade-off. You are going to probably sacrifice some autonomy. You're going to sacrifice potentially some income, not always, but potentially. But man, if you want work-life balance, this perfect homeostatic, like the amount of work is this and the perfect proportion to work and life is that, just go work for somebody.
Yeah. You will work harder and have more stress and have always on the brain all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's not always like that. And I know, Kip, you and I have
season
talked about
to
this.
it. You get
there's
to
a season.
Point. Yeah.
Yeah. So in Order of Man, for example, I was working 2 hours before I would go to work, and then I would get done with work and I would go back to working 2 more hours on Order of Man stuff. There was no balance in that whatsoever. It was heavily skewed towards the work side of things. And I did that for a year, give or take. And it changed and adjusted. And then gradually I was more with my family. And now look, I'm in the process of writing a book. And so I'm heavily vested in writing every day. I'm 2 to 3 hours of writing every single day. So those percentages start to get skewed again, but I communicate those. I talk about them. I realize if I go hard for the next 60 to 90 days, then that eases up a little bit. And then we get back into this more homeostatic position, but there's no work-life balance. It's just micro adjustments based on outside factors and desires. And then sometimes you got to go hard into business. Sometimes, maybe your wife's dealing with some postpartum, or one of your children breaks their leg, or has a breakup with their boyfriend or girlfriend. And so it's like, hey, well, I got to put a little more time into this than I do in the business. And so it evolves, it adjusts. It's not a good answer, but it's the real answer.
Yeah. And part of what you're saying, I hear, and is, be mindful of the price, right? Don't fall into this trap of like, there's not a price for this, right? But there's going to be a price. The question is get clear on what that price is going to be. And we always talk about this when there's times and seasons, like time box that, communicate it thoroughly to those that are going to be affected by it. And, just know that it's not going to be easy.
Yep. And also communication is a big part of it, just keeping those lines of communication open, which I think generally we don't do very well as men, generally. No. So you over communicate, I would say. It's going to feel like over communication to you, but it's going to be like normal communication to women. So just over communicate. Hun, here's what I got going on this week. Hun, today I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and I'll be home at this day. Hey, on Saturday, I'm all yours. But on Sunday, I got to put 5 hours in at the office. Like, and your children too, just talk about it. And you might say to yourself, or even just not verbalize it, but like, why they should know, they'll understand. No, they won't. What, how in the world would a 7-year-old child understand that you're knee deep in this client proposition or proposal that you're working? Like, how's a 7-year-old going to understand that? You're lying to yourself. You're lying to them. They don't get it. So communicate it so they can.
And it's related, but on the business side, one of the things that one of the intrinsic motivators of individuals of feeling valued is being communicated to be in the know.
True. It means you care. It means you care about
it's almost a form of letting them know that you care. Right. So
not even almost.
Logan
Absolutely
Rowe.
It is.
Yeah. Logan Rowe, what are your thoughts on mental health, particularly men who go to therapy? Wusses. Man up. You don't need to talk about your feelings.
This is your therapy. Go to Jiu Jitsu. That's your therapy. That's such a broad question. What are your thoughts? Like whenever questions start with like, what are your thoughts? Like, I know it's going to be pretty broad. What are my thoughts about mental illness? It's a legitimate thing. Like there are people who are mentally ill. I don't consider having a bad day or being down for a season as a mental illness. I don't think it is. I think there's something off in your life and your emotions are manifesting what it is that's off. You just need to figure it out. But then there is mental illness, which I would generally say is more chronic. Like
Yeah.
it's persistent, it's lasting. You've tried things, it's not working. Okay, that might be chronic mental illness, but being depressed, are you mentally ill? I I don't think so. I
I think
just
we
think
jumped to that gun a little too quickly, but
I do. But but here's another thing too. You don't have to be mentally ill. Just think about that word first, that phrase.
yeah.
It just sounds wrong. You don't have to be mentally ill to go get therapy. Like, again, let's use the analogy of a carpenter. Would a carpenter who wants to build a big, beautiful home leave his hammer at home and say, guys who use hammers are weak? And so what are you going to do? Bang your head against a nail every time you're trying to put a nail into a 2x4 and see if it works?
Yeah. Or
That's
go get
ridiculous.
additional training to become a better carpenter.
Right. Oh, really?
Yeah.
You're not good enough. You need to go get training.
Yeah.
What a pathetic sack of shit you are. Like, nobody thinks about it. But then when you start thinking about your own mental health and well-being, it's like, oh, well, you're down on yourself and you need to talk to somebody about it. What a loser.
Yeah,
Really?
it's really unfortunate that society, there's like this, like you're broken or like something's wrong. And it's funny because like, I was just having this conversation where we're putting together some content around like soft skills training, right, for employees. And some of the training is relationship building. Some of the training is communication. Some of the training is mindset and growth mindset. You don't think psychology is encompassed in all of those subjects? And the answer is, yeah, totally it is. Right. So we're mental. So we should always be working on our mental training and improving our mindsets and everything. Like it's part of life, and it shows up everywhere. It shows up how we have this conversation. It shows up on how you show up at home. It's part of being human. It's really weird. And we just wait until we're maybe broken to actually do something about it versus like, well, actually, no, this is just a means of improving myself constantly. I don't know.
Well, and there's a I think it's pretty generally held belief that if you want to perform well, then you would hire a coach or a mentor.
Yeah.
I think most people understand that concept. And again, you're not going to ever mock somebody or laugh at somebody because they hired a mentor. And so if you choose to look at having to have a conversation with somebody to work through some things that you don't know how to work through, if you want to consider that a mentorship instead of a therapist, then do that.
Yeah.
It's the way you frame it. But I don't think there's anything wrong with actually some of the most cathartic moments of my life have come from working with a therapist who helped me see some things that I couldn't see myself. And that I didn't feel weak. I was like, oh, that's actually good. Like that's some good stuff. And it made me better. So yeah, there is mental health. And then there's just being down and just dealing with the difficulties of life, and being in therapy is not a problem. There's other avenues too. Find a good hobby, like a wholesome, physical related, competitively driven hobby, and have a band of brothers. I don't think it replaces therapy, but it's a nice addition too. It rounds out I'm trying to think about how I could say it, your mental health regimen, right? Like all of us have a physical regimen. Like we go train, we go lift, we go run, we go for a walk. We have to hit this many steps. We try to eat this food and not that food. That's your physical training. That's your regimen for your physicality. Well, you can do that for your mentality too. And so build that out. I've got a hobby. I've got a vent there. I've got brothers I can talk with. I've got a therapist if I need to go chat with them. And so that's your regimen. Those are your tools that you can rely on to build up your mental strength.
Copy. Kevin Bovey. This is a little bit long one. I'll struggle through this. So steps to take to win over the love of your life after she has filed for a divorce. I know you've been through what I'm going through. I'm at the point where I realize my failure as a man, as a husband, and as a father. I'm on a new journey of correcting my mistakes, growing and developing daily to become the best version of myself. I've already left the home, and she's already began talking to other men. I want her back, but I know I need time to heal myself, grow into the man I know I should have already been, and give her time and space to heal herself. What steps would you recommend to achieve these things? I'm on this journey of self-development, regardless of the divorce. If she never wants me back, I know I still need to grow.
I actually don't want to answer this question, not because it's not important, but because we've done a couple of in-depth conversations around this. And so anything that I would say to answer that question is a repeat and not to the same degree that we've covered in other episodes. So actually what I want you to do is I want you to go wherever you're listening to podcasts, whether it's Spotify or iTunes or Stitcher or wherever, and just go to ours, or even go to our website. You can go to our website, and there's a podcast called Fix Your Marriage by Fixing Yourself. And there's another one called Fix Yourself First. And I want you to go listen to those. I think between those two, there's probably an hour worth of content there. And again, anything I shared with you right now would be a couple of minutes. So go listen to those. Anybody who's dealing with this right now, and there's a lot of you, I know there are, and I feel for you, which is why I want to give you everything you need in those two podcasts that will do it significantly better justice than what I can do here. Fix Your Marriage by Fixing Yourself, and Fix Yourself First.
Okay. Andrew Chastian, what can I do as an individual when I feel like my church globally is losing the courage of its convictions?
What can you do personally?
Yeah.
Live your life within your own convictions and lead others to do the same. Like, what does your global church have to do with the way that you show up and perform? Now, granted, you want, whether it's a church or a business that you belong to, you want the organization that you believe in to live up to its ideals, but you don't have any control over that. What are you going to do? Go talk to the Pope about how the Catholic Church is making mistakes? How's that going to work? Like, is that going to change? It's not going to change anything. So where do you start? With the lowest common denominator. It's like in math.
Yeah.
You know, if you wanted to add fractions, what did you need to do? You got to find the lowest common denominator. Same thing here. And the lowest common denominator is you. The second lowest common denominator is your wife and your children. And then it's your neighbors. And then it's your community. And that community could even be your church parish or a men's group within inside of your church organization. And then it expands from there. So what can you do personally? Like I said last time, fix yourself first. Work on yourself, expand it from there. That's how you build and grow influence. You're not going to do it from the top down. You need to do it from the bottom up.
Yeah. And we had another question that maybe we put on the coattails of this one is like, you know, and I can't find the question right now because I scrolled past it already, but a brother was asking about, you know, how do we show up better in our communities to help men be, you know, better fathers and better husbands. And I would suggest that it's an echo of what you just said, right? Like by being a great father, a great husband, and being in contact with those said people.
Well, you know, it reminds me of the questions that we hear periodically, which is like, how do you make your dent in the universe? Bro, you can't, and I'd say this jokingly, you can't even take the trash out when you say you will. How in the world are you going to make a dent in the universe? You can't even put that alcohol down. You can't even not eat that extra taco at dinner. Like, what the hell are you talking about? How you're going to dent the universe? Like, you can't even make a dent in the scale for your weight. Like, do that first.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about changing your family, not the universe, like your family. Maybe get your kids to connect with you a little deeper. You know, maybe have a deeper conversation, get them to do a little bit more of their schoolwork, get them to play their sports a little harder or show a little more dedication. Or maybe you get your wife to be attracted to you because you're worried and working on yourself. And then you start dialing that in. And then you look to your employment. And like we were saying earlier, you know, you go all in, you train new people, like make your dent where it counts. In the universe, it doesn't count right now.
Yeah.
Because what are you going to do? Like, how do you even see that working?
Yeah.
But I can go impact my kids. I can go have a conversation with my son or my daughter right now and make a huge dent in 60 seconds, negatively or positively, by the way.
Yeah.
But I could do that in 60 seconds. I could turn this podcast off and I could go make a dent right now.
And that's
So
part of your training, right? Like that's, by you getting yourself aligned, that's part of the training that preps you to then be in a better position to have an influence on your family. And as you improve in that area, that is your training to be better at influencing other people outside of your family and your community, and then et cetera, right? Like some people want to jump ahead and think that like there's nothing that they could just get to a point of causing greater influence when they can't even influence those around them. Ultimately is what I'm trying to say.
yeah, and I think there's another thing too, and I believe this is generally good, is that we as men look around for problems to solve, and we think that because there's so much injustice in the world, we must not be doing enough. Well, there's a couple things. Sometimes it takes time. Like if I wanted to lose 20 pounds, yeah, I can lose 20 pounds. I'm not going to do it today, but what I eat today is certainly going to make an impact. But I won't experience 20 pounds of loss for the next 2 to 3 months. And so we generally associate the lack of result with with too little effort, right? So well, the reason I'm not losing any weight, I'm not doing it hard enough. And so you just go harder, and then you burn yourself out, and then you just get back onto the same scale you were before. You just need to focus on the small actions and then gradual improvement from there. So I was training today. I did a little training with Brian Littlefield, and him and I do some one-on-one training every week. Just him and I. He's a black belt, and he has me come with like specific things I want to work on, whether it's certain positions or submissions or just general knowledge about jiu-jitsu. And I was asking him the other day, last time we got together, about, something specific. He's like, that's good to know, but we'll probably talk about that in a couple months. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, you don't need to know that. Like here's what you need to know, like how to escape this, or how to keep somebody in your guard, or guard retention. Like work on that first. And when you build that, then we'll do it. It's like Mr. Miyagi's, wax on, wax off. Well, I don't want to know how to throw a punch. No, just wax on, wax off right now. Paint the wall for now. And so that's what we need to do, is focus on the little incremental things that will make a difference. And then we execute them, we put them into practice, and then we build on our skill set from there. But you can't go from like A to Z. You have to go from A to B. And the problem we have as men is it doesn't happen fast enough. And while I can appreciate that, wanting it to happen now, that's an indicator of desire and drive, it just isn't realistic. And then it ends up discouraging us, and we move on from our goals and objectives.
Yeah, copy. All right, last fun short question. So Pavel Polavoy, what is the best way to start sparring in jiu-jitsu? And now that I read it, is he talking about striking within jiu-jitsu or going to open mat?
I interpret it as striking in jiu-jitsu. So what I would suggest is the next purple belt or higher that you train with, just punch him in the face at the first opportunity you get. And then he'll understand, and he'll start punching you back.
And it'll get started.
Now you're sparring.
Right
look, I don't know. I actually don't. If you're talking about, when you're saying sparring, if you're talking about open mat, like roll, like you do that at a school, right? That's what they're going to do. Different schools are different. Kip, like I know you guys are heavy emphasis on technique and drilling. Whereas that's not to say you guys don't train. You do, you roll, but it's heavy. Am I right? I'm right on that. I mean,
we'll do a class and then open mat.
Mat. Right.
Yeah.
So, but my school is like, you go.
Sometimes you guys show up before open mat,
and you just go roll like for an hour and a half. And at the end, we'll dabble some technique in there. So each school is going to be slightly different. So, you adjust or go to the one you like, if that's what you're talking about. If you're talking about sparring, same thing. I think certain schools, like you guys, do more of, I don't know what you call it, but I would say more of like self-defense jujitsu as opposed to sport jujitsu. Like there's the sport of it, which I'm not going to go like arm bar. Like I'm not going to get a fight on the street and try to arm bar. I'm going to try to choke them out, but like, I'm not going to do an omoplata on somebody in the street. Like I just don't see that happening.
Yeah.
And so there's other schools that are going to be more self-defense oriented, and they actually might mix some striking into jiu-jitsu. We don't
Yeah,
personally do that, but there are
for
schools that do
sure.
that.
Yeah. So if Pavel's saying, hey, I've been taking jujitsu classes, these guys are having sparring sessions or open mat, that the best way to start, I would just say, is just go. But maybe a mindset benefit would be like, if this is you're nervous about it, you're learning a little bit of technique, but you haven't been to open mat yet, just try to, what I try to tell people is just be mindful as you're training. Like, think through it. Like, okay, why am I like controlling my heart rate and breathing hard? And why am I trying to stop everything he's doing when I don't even know what he's doing? Right. Like, just try to go with the flow. Your body's going to naturally act a certain way. And we all do, when we first got started, but the more mindfulness that you have around your training and what you're trying to do, and trying to protect yourself, maybe initially in those first phases, is just think, hey, I'm just not going to try to get submitted, and find your game, whatever that game is, based upon
I
who
think it's
your
also,
sparring partners are.
yeah, I think it's also a personality thing, So my personality is, if I had never trained jiu-jitsu before, I could just, again, this is my personality. I could show up to an open mat and just say, I'm just going to go figure it out. And I could
Yeah.
go get my ass kicked for an hour and I would come back.
Yeah.
And there's some personalities, they would never do that. Maybe they would go, and if they got their asses kicked for an hour, they'd say, this isn't for me. I don't like it. That's
totally.
not
And
my personality.
that's why some schools won't let new guys go to open mat and have open sparring, because the reality of it is most people go, screw that shit. I just got my ass handed to me for an hour and a half, and I don't even know these guys. Like,
so, but look at the other side too. Cause if I went to a class and they said, hey, we're going to drill for an hour and a half. And then I'm like, okay, that sounds good. I've never been, like, I don't know what to expect. So I go drill on some move or maneuver or position for an hour and a half. And I'm like, okay, well, when do we get to apply it? They're like, oh, you don't get to do that. I'm like, screw that. Like, I'm here to do it. I'm not here to like patty cake each other. Like, so you gotta find something that works for you. And I think both are good. I think drill and instruction, and I think live rolls are crucial in your development. So, but that might be a personality thing too. The name of the game is just to stay in it, and whatever's going to keep you in the game,
push through whatever is blocking you from not
that's
going,
right.
and just go anyway. Yeah. And really, from a striking perspective, just find some partners, throw some 4-ounce gloves on, and train jiu-jitsu and punch each other. That's how you get started.
It sounds so truth, ridiculous, but it's the truth. Like, I do that with one of my training partners, Brody Cousineau. We don't strike, but like when we started, we were both white belts. This was 2.5 years ago, and we still do. We beat the shit out of each other. And I remember, like, I'll go in there and be like, hey, let's go 50%. And we'll go 50% for like 10 seconds. And then we just balls to the wall. Like, we beat the shit out of each other, but also we've agreed upon that. Like, that's the expectation too, right? Like,
that's how you roll with each other.
I'm coming to go. You're coming to go. Like, I'm coming to get you. You're coming to get me. Like, I'm not going to make a cheap shot or like change the expectation. Like, no, that's the expectation. So if you set the expectation that, hey guys, we're going to do some light striking as we roll, and that's the expectation from everybody else, man, that's awesome. I think go for it.
Yeah, for sure. All right, sir. We'll go ahead and wrap up. So, all
right, guys.
Questions. Well, let's just talk about the Iron Council. So it is December 2nd.
Yep.
And we are limiting when the IC is open for enrollment. And
this podcast actually is going to release on the 8th. So we're even deeper into this thing.
Rookie. Yeah. By now it's probably full. Just joking.
So don't worry about it.
Yeah. No. So go to orderman.com/Iron Council. We'll leave it open for a period of time, and then it's going to close back up until, the next opening. And so when those opportunities come, you guys need to take advantage of them and hop in. And
that's right.
If you need to be notified of those openings or future events that we have for next year and et cetera, go to orderman.com, sign up for the newsletter, follow Mr. Mickler on the socials to stay connected and updated on what we have going on.
And as of this recording, which is the 2nd of December, so a week ago, if you're listening to this, the day it came out, we had 47 new members already joined. So get on it very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Get on it quick. All right, guys, that's all we've got. Good questions today. Keep them coming. And we will be back on Friday. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.